For today's lesson, what I thought I would talk about is just the general. This is something I get asked pretty frequently. So the question is, how does a person learn programming faster and more effectively? Because obviously that's what we all do. That's like probably one of the most important critical skills we have is to learn the new topics. Maybe the other skill is learning how to apply those new concepts in production code or whatever code you're working with. So I wanted to kind of try to summarize my thoughts and experiences just in 4 specific tips. So don't worry, I will try not to ramble too much. But to just give you kind of my 4 biggest tips about what not to do and what to do when it comes to learning programming. So that is the topic for today, which is how to learn programming languages quickly. And to help me along, I have the world's worst photo viewer application. We've got the Windows 10 photo viewer or gallery application. And it's even worse now after an update than before. So we'll see if I can maintain my composure and not let my anger management issues shine through too deeply. But let's get started here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you my top 4 tips for learning programming quickly and more efficiently. So the first 2 tips are things not to do, and then the second two tips are things which I would advise. And they're all kind of linked together, so you should be able to figure out the general theme. So the first thing I have to say is number 1, and if you do want to take notes, you can write down the main points and then I'll kind of ramble about them. So number 1 is avoid rote memorization. So what does rote memorization means? The easiest I could describe it without using a bunch of technical words is it's generally how you learn things in school if you don't happen to be in a school system which pays any attention to the most effective ways to learn new things. So we're talking just someone spews some fact at you and you maybe get as far as writing it down, but you have nothing to ground this information in. You're not grounding it in a project you're working on. It's not, maybe it's totally new to you, so you can't even ground it to something that you're familiar with ahead of time. And that is basically, by definition, like the worst way to learn. So the problem I had is that in my particular school system, Canadian school system, I don't recall ever really having a single person explain to me more effective methods for learning. And so this was just the tool that I had coming out of school. And it wasn't until I took several courses in learning, or cognition, as the technical word goes, that I started to really understand that a lot of my difficulties in memorization were caused by the fact that I was really just doing it the least effective way, and no one had explained a more effective means. So I won't talk about too many specifics here. I can get into that in another video. But the principal takeaway here is don't just like go on the internet like I did when I started, read some article, maybe like copy it down word for word, and then maybe like, try to learn things based on that approach. It really is the worst way to do it, especially with things like programming, where you really need to work with the code in order to learn properly and to apply it to your projects. So that's number 1, and we'll see if I can get Windows Photo Viewer to behave. There we go. Don't learn languages and concepts as well, like a bit of a omission there, by topic, or what we call laundry list style. So just kind of going through. So I'll give you a direct example right now of what I mean by laundry list style. So again, when I started learning programming, this was basically the best idea I had, and it turned out also to be, for reasons I'll get into, not a good approach at all. So let's just say hypothetically, so I pulled up the Oracle documentation here, and let's just say like hypothetically I'm like, I want to learn Java. And so the laundry list style learning approach is you basically pull out like a paper or a notepad, and you basically note every single topic one by one in a documentation. Like this would be the best example is like, let's say I want to master Java. Well, it's kind of a fair assumption to think that if I learn every topic here in isolation, then that will basically allow me to master Java, right? Well, as someone who actually tried to do that, I can tell you it's really just impossible. And the reason why, there's many reasons. So number one, you're just picking random topics and you're not necessarily kind of including them in projects that you're interested in working on. So it's really tough to actually get your brain interested for no good reason in learning JMX. Like we go in here, I guess I should learn JMX to master Java. I don't even know what that is. Java Management Extensions. I've never even looked at it before. But anyways, the point being, this is not a good or effective way to learn topics because it's not necessarily going to give you the actual core skills and the core language features that you're looking at. And I would actually even apply this to like documentation for the language specifically. They tend to be taught in a very isolated set of topics, and I really don't advise doing that. Now you might be wondering, well, how do I learn the language if I don't learn the appropriate topics? So what I will do now is let's get into tip number 4. So these are the things I wanted to point to that I don't really suggest. They're things I tried before and they just really failed me epically. What I do suggest is, and I've said this over and over again and I've made several videos on this, follow a project-based learning approach. Now, I really can't actually stress how important this is for many reasons. So, reason number 1, as I mentioned before, I've taken several classes on cognition or learning, how to learn well, and one of the main takeaways I got from all of those courses is that interest is directly tied to your ability to learn new information, is number 1. Secondly, on the learning topic, is that the more ways you work with the information using creepy hand gestures, the more ways you work with the information, the more different parts of your brain you involve in the information, and you will retain it better. So really, really quickly, they did a study. I'm going to go through this really quickly. They did a study where they had group number 1. Let's say we had 4 groups. I'm going to basically make this up based on the study that I read, just for brevity's sake. We have 4 groups of students, and group number 1, all they do is they're given information by someone who says it to them. Group number 2, they are given information by someone who says it to them, writes it on the board, and then they have to write it down word for word. Group number 3 is given the information by someone who says it to them, writes it on the board, and then they have to write what was said, the information, in their own words. And then group number 4 has to do all that I just said, and then they have to teach it to someone else. So what you do is if you actually test these different groups, I don't know what the actual study is, I'd have to find it, but the gist of it is if you test groups A, B, C, D, those groups for them, if you were to plot their memory retention rate, it would start at like 10% for the first group who just heard the information, and I'm throwing these numbers out there, but like maybe 30% for the group who wrote it down, and maybe like 50% for the group who wrote it down in their own words, and then like 80% for the group who had to teach it to someone else. So it goes on a curve kind of like that. So that's why you want to work with it in code. Don't just write it down. I made that mistake before. Don't do that. So the other thing is with the interest part is that, well, let me get to number 4 and I'll kind of jump in there. So this is kind of related. But number 4 is find a project you want to build and use. So one of the few things I did intelligently at the start of my career in learning Android programming is that I decided, okay, I'm going to stop doing that rote memorization stuff because I had already tried that before. It didn't help me. And what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to think of an application I would like to build or use, preferably both, and I'm going to build it. And instead of doing the let's learn every single topic in the language in isolation, then I do make a list. I make a list of topics relevant to the project I'm trying to build, and I learn topics and implement them in that project. And that will do so many different awesome things for you. It will help you retain the information better because you will have actually written it. You'll have coded out what you're learning. You'll know it in code, which is the most important thing. And if it's a project you're personally interested in, it'll be easier to motivate yourself. And best of all, if it's actually a reasonable application, what you can then do if you're a beginner is you can sign up with either GitHub or Bitbucket. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, pick GitHub and put that code online onto a repository, and then you can use that as basically your resume if you want to get hired as a junior developer, which is something I did do. I didn't get hired as a junior developer at that one point, in one case because I turned the job down because the contract sucked, but I can actually claim that this is an effective way to get hired as a junior developer, because what a lot of different companies are looking for is they just want to know, can you learn reasonably quickly and can you write code that doesn't look like absolute garbage? So don't worry if your code looks like garbage at the start, but just keep refining your application over time. So those are my top 4 tips for learning languages and concepts effectively. And just to summarize things again, so avoid rote memorization. So actually write code. Work with the information. Don't just write it down on a piece of paper. Write some code even if you don't really understand what's going on. Follow along with tutorials. You will learn that way. That's why I always do these long form tutorials. It's like, okay, if I want to show you how to build a house, then I will take you along the whole way and show you as I'm building the entire house. Whereas a lot of people do this like 10-minute video for every topic kind of approach, and y'all know what I think about that. So anyways, don't learn languages topic by topic. Like I said before, don't hop into the Java documentation or the Kotlin documentation and try to learn everything and then you start coding applications. Don't do that. Find a project you want to build, a project that you're interested in. Figure out what topics you need to learn relative or relevant to that project and build that project. And that is what I suggest for everyone learning new things. And this applies even if, let's say, you want to learn a new complicated technology like Dagger 2 or RxJava or coroutines. Make a demo project, like a proof of concept, and try to go about it like that. And you can watch articles and read articles, watch videos, and do things like that, do code labs. But please try to follow project-based learning because you will retain the information better. You can use it for a resume, essentially. And yeah, that's basically my main suggestions there. So that's it for my top 4 tips on how to learn programming faster and more efficiently. So hopefully that was useful. I'm just going to run a quick commercial break and we'll get to some Q&A now.